We are now live. Presenter's laptop sound check. Clerk's laptop sound check.
So we're going to go live. There you go. Ready to go. We are live, Councillor Ferguson. Councillor Ferguson, you're live. And you're muted. There you go.
There. Sorry, my phone rang. I got distracted. So welcome everyone then to the General Issues Committee meeting. It's Transit Day on January the 21st. Quorum is present, and I would like to call the meeting to order. Members of the public are advised that our meetings are webcast live by the City of Hamilton and temporarily archived on the city's website. We, as well, are reminded that all electronic devices are to be switched to the non-audible function during committee meetings. Members are reminded of the 5-minute time limit, which will be adhered to during the meeting. Members can submit another request to speak if they require additional time to ask questions or make comments. So before we begin, Mayor Eisenberger would like to say a few words. So Mayor Eisenberger, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Actually, I will be speaking on a remembrance of, this is Lincoln Alexander's official birthday. And as you know, he was a Canadian lawyer who became the first Black member of Parliament, the first Black federal cabinet minister, the first Black Canadian chair of the Workers' Compensation Board, and the 24th Lieutenant Governor of Ontario. He was appointed as a Companion of the Order of Canada and to the Order of Ontario in 1982. He was born in 1922 when the Canadian society was intertwined with racism, and Lincoln Alexander advocated against visible minorities being treated as second-class citizens. Today marks the 100th anniversary of his birth as we celebrate and recognize Lincoln Alexander Day today. It's an important opportunity for us to mark and celebrate all that he represents to us today. Now, and like most of you, I'm sure, have long held respect and admiration for Lincoln Alexander and an appreciation for his historic contributions to our city, province, and nation. Equally, I'm outraged and disappointed by the Zoom hack that occurred this past Sunday prior to the streamed broadcast of the Lincoln Alexander Martin Luther King Jr. event hosted by the Afro-Canadian Caribbean Association, where the streaming audience was subjected to racism and profanity. Regrettable and unacceptable, and I join the community in taking this ugly intervention very seriously. So let's continue to stand together to make Hamilton a city free of hate. Considering this, I hope that everyone will take a moment to remember Lincoln Alexander for his dignity, courage, for his commitment to justice, and his compassion and humanity. He was an outstanding role model and is an outstanding role model and a visionary whose compact impact will continue to live on, inspire, and influence generations that will follow. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and happy Lincoln Alexander Day.
Thank you, Your Worship, and well, very well said. So we'll move on to the agenda now, which is the approval of the agenda. Madam Clerk, are there any changes to the agenda?
Yes, 3, Mr. Deputy Mayor. Just one added change. It's the January 20th minutes.
Okay, I'm going to second then to approve the agenda as amended. Moved by Partridge, seconded by Pearson. All in favor?
Thank you, Councillor Jackson. Councillor Partridge and Councillor Powers.
It's not coming up on my eScribe stuff.
Okay, I'll just
sure
take
why.
a thumbs up. Technology is
Absolutely.
not on. Thank you, ma'am. And that carries 14-0.
Okay, thank you, Madam Clerk. Of interest. So members of committee, are there any declarations of interest today? Seeing none, I'll move on then to the approval of the minutes of January the 20th. May I have a mover and a seconder to put the minutes of January 20th on the floor? Moved by Nan, seconded by Clark. Discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Thank you, Councillor Jackson. Thank you, Councillor Partridge. And that carries 14-0.
Okay, let's move on to item 6, presentations. Marine Cost Heath, Director of Transit, will provide the presentation for item 6.1, which is our transit budget. So Maureen, if you can turn your camera on, there you are. Welcome to GIC, and the floor is yours.
Thank you. Just one moment while I share my screen. Good morning. For the last 22 months and counting, our transit workers have been committed to providing exceptional service through very unusual circumstances. For almost 2 years, the maintenance staff, the operators, the inspectors, the dispatchers, the customer care representatives, and admin staff alike, there is an entire team of people working night and day to help make sure you get where you want to go. COVID-19 has continued to highlight what we've always known, that transit is essential for many Hamiltonians. So the next time you see an HSR staff member, make sure to say thank you. They love to hear it, and we love to see them get the recognition they so richly deserve. I would be remiss if I didn't take a moment to thank the transit leadership team for their patience and assistance over the past months. As the new director of transit, onboarding during a pandemic has been an unusual experience, to say the least. Their commitment to transit, to the future goals of the organization, and to the customers make me very proud to have joined their team. I would also like to take a moment to recognize the executive of the Amalgamated Transit Union for the same reasons. They have been very important to communicate with, and we welcome them back to our labor management roundtable meetings. Open communication during this time and as we move forward into the exciting future of transit in Hamilton will be vital for our continued shared success. My presentation today will span approximately an hour and has been structured in the categories outlined on this slide. In general, our highlights from 2021, building better transit, the operating budget for 2022, and then focusing on the future, the vision of transit for the city of Hamilton. Simply put, in transit, we're here to get you where you want to go when you want to get there. But more than that, we want to create a customer-focused experience that meets the needs of our customers today and tomorrow by creating a service that is appealing and welcoming, not only for our existing customers, but is also designed to attract new people to transit as well. We will do that through making sure we have a well-maintained fleet, solid transit infrastructure, and building out a network and system that helps us achieve the stretch goal of 12% mode share split identified in the city's transportation master plan. HSR is the city's transit division, which delivers service on fixed route conventional transit, accessible transportation for specialized through DARTs, and our latest offering, on-demand transit. We tend to think about transit in a very constrained manner. You take conventional transit, or you need specialized transit. It exists in silos, and you pick from one of these two rather constrictive options, which really is not an option at all. Building an effective and efficient system means customer choice. It means conventional service must be fully accessible, so too with on-demand. We've taken great strides with a fully low-floor fleet of buses and increasing accessible stop amenities, but there is still more to do. Customers should be able to choose between a mode that meets their needs and seamlessly flow between them because the system as a whole is integrated. We must turn our minds to an intentional system design that promotes multimodal travel and ease of use for our customers. Let's look back at what we achieved in 2021 based on our service offerings. While it was not an easy year, our ridership was approximately 44% of normal conditions, and we proudly transported 9.5 million customers with revenues of $26 million. Traveling close to 17 million kilometers, I would like to highlight the exceptional and safe operation of the vehicles by our highly trained and skilled operators. This is evidenced by our 29% CVOR rating, which is a Ministry of Transportation mandatory program that governs commercial vehicles. And on their rating scale, the lower your mark is, the better you're doing. So this is indeed a wonderful performance indicator for our safe operators behind the wheel. With over 2,000 bus stops in the system, almost 70% of these are already AODA compliant. We've maintained 700 shelters, including adding 23 new ones this past year. And we've added or replaced an additional 78 bus stop pads. We've sent more than 14,000 text messages. And with 49% of our fleet powered by natural gas, Hamilton is a leader in its field. In terms of comparison with other transit agencies within the GTA, it's important to note that we do a very effective and efficient job at operating fiscally responsible transit compared to our other comparators in the 905. These stats are from 2020 and are released by the Canadian Urban Transit Association. You will note that we are number one in revenue cost per hour and number one in the RC ratio and offer the second lowest fare. These are good metrics to be sure. We are still the best on our RC ratio, even based on last year's statistics compared to others. The Accessible Specialized Transit Division at HSR ensures that our desired specialized services are delivered through DARTS, the contractor. Last year, DARTS did complete a significantly lower number of passenger trips given the conditions of the pandemic, program cancellations, and the various restrictions that were in place. Whilst we had expected to do over 600,000 trips, our ridership did decrease, and you can see that we did about 47%, again, for the reasons I mentioned a moment ago. The forecasted cost per trip was anticipated to come in around $40, but came up 16% higher at $45. While it seems illogical that fewer riders would result in higher cost per trip, it is the relationship between the vehicle utilization and vehicle capacity that you see reflected there. There were more single riders and more restrictive capacity limits on the vehicles that caused this shift. The total expenditures for DARTS came in at 53% of budget. But this $12 million positive variance was used to mitigate other revenue shortcomings in the overall transit budget, with the balance of our other shortfalls made up from Safe Restart funding. The newly launched on-demand pilot in Waterdown will be addressed in greater detail in the conversation, but the early stats are very interesting. Riders can book by telephone or use an app on the smartphone, which is the most common mechanism, and we already have more than 1,000 subscribers on the MyRide app. We've delivered more than 10,000 trips. Our on-time performance is sitting at 94%. The average ride is only 12 minutes long, which compared to our last transit survey, conventional transit riders tend to be on the bus for approximately 23 minutes on average. One of the many benefits of on-demand transit is more direct routing with fewer stops. I'd also like to call attention to the significant improvement in the service area. The traditional Waterdown fixed route, we've now expanded the service area to 16 square kilometers, which is 45% bigger than what we were able to cover on the fixed route model. In addition to the 71 traditional style bus stops from the fixed route days, we've added an additional 79 new virtual stops. This makes transit faster, easier, and more accessible for people. Those are all core attributes to earn new customers. As we prepared for the fall board in September 21, there was cautious optimism, which of course has taken a dramatic turn over the past couple of months due to Omicron. But through it all, HSR has had a strong COVID-19 response, community participation, and launched our Welcome Back, We're Ready to Ride strategy and implemented year 5 of the 10-year local transit strategy. Since March of 2020, the health and safety of our customers and staff alike have been front and center. Continued efforts to protect both groups have been ongoing. While we've taken tangible actionable steps towards the safety and well-being of those on boards, and those will remain in place as we work diligently to return people back to transit. Increased onboard cleaning schedules, masking requirements, bioshields, vaccination uptake rates, all of these are layers of defense in our mutual fight against COVID-19. We placed an emphasis on early and frequent communications with our customers to ensure they have the confidence to return. Our service has been responsive to the changing demand of ridership, first scaling back significantly in March of 2020, and then returning to full service in the fall of 2021. And then, in response to the highly contagious Omicron variant, we are preparing to implement new service levels on January 23rd. The service levels that will be put into place next week provide our customers certainty so that they can plan their journey with confidence. HSR is a key part of our community, and we're committed to giving back and contributing to the greater good. One example of actions we've taken was the loan of our re-envision bus to the paramedics in support of mobile vaccination clinics. The re-envision bus was actually customized in-house by our talented shop staff, and it was designed for the purpose of community engagement. With that in mind, there is no greater community engagement than getting shots in arms, and we will continue to provide access to this bus in support for as long as is necessary. For community members who needed fully accessible transportation to access vaccination services, Hamilton's contractor, DARTS, provided close to 4,000 trips to clinics. And we also supported transportation for non-registered users to COVID testing sites and clinics alike. In preparation for the fall change to the board, our customer experience and innovation team developed a 7-point plan designed to promote the tangible actions that transit is taking to keep people safe on board. And it also sets out what we expect from our customers in terms of masking requirements. The intent of the 7-point plan is to take an educational and information-based approach to communicate with our customers so they know what we're doing to keep them safe and what they need to know to keep themselves, the operator, and their fellow customers on board safe as well. We've also been able to be very responsive to our messaging, and in mid-December, we changed messaging slightly, making sure that our customers knew to dress appropriately on board as bus windows may be open to promote airflow and circulation. This was another step we were able to take as an additional level of defense against COVID-19. Back in 2015, and at the behest of Council, the 10-year local transit strategy was developed and approved to set out as a means for investment in transit. In fall of 2021, we implemented the Year 5 investments as a part of the 10-year local transit strategy. Through Council's investment of $4.2 million and with a 5% fare increase in place for September, we added an additional 46,000 hours of service, brought in 13 new expansion buses, and 35 new full-time staff members. Based on these investments, multiple service improvements were realized. The highlights were improving peak and evening frequency on Route 44 Rymel as we build up service and service demand as a precursor to the S-Line that will operate along that same corridor. Improving frequency and extending weekday service span on Route 20A line as we continue to develop our second blast route. Improved evening frequency on Route 43 Stonechurch to align service levels with other connecting routes. And route modifications in the Heritage Green area closed connectivity gaps, improving the connections from 2 routes to 4. Another significant service milestone for transit in 2021 was the implementation of the on-demand transit project in Waterdown. This new service is branded as My Ride. As you will recall from last year's presentation, this initiative was born out of connecting the community in Waterdown by meeting the needs of the business community who told us that we needed to provide them better access to employment on the west side of town by transit. Through our re-envision survey, that they were looking for better improvements to journey time. And through consultation with our colleagues in ECDEV, we learned that employers are looking to invest and are very concerned about how employees access their facilities. And sometimes good transit options are a decision point for developers and employers alike. So based on the feedback from the stakeholders, we identified that a pilot was the most tangible way to test a different way of delivering service, improve upon meeting the council approved service standards, including extending route coverage, growing transit ridership to meet the objective of improved productivity and improve the customer experience for those using transit services in Waterdown. As with any change, there is a learning curve. That is to be expected. And the Waterdown Route 18 as a conventional transit route was constrained and provided little opportunity to continue to grow ridership. By migrating to the on-demand model, the service footprint has grown exponentially, connecting even more customers to transit. The model still connects to major centers of interest, including the very important connection to the Aldershot GO station. In a conventional model, the bus travels a fixed route on fixed schedules. With the on-demand model, the customer summons the bus, either by pre-booking, by phone, or by an app. And we accommodate both methods because we recognize we have non-digital riders as well. Our early experience in on-demand has taught us that there's a learning curve with the customers as they transition onto the on-demand product. Most customers do benefit for some personalized support to walk them through how to use the app or book a trip. And we've also learned there's a lot of misinformation about the service change out there on social media, stemming from lack of familiarity or not having tried the product yet. These types of learning experiences will be reflected in our pilot evaluation that will be brought forth in April of this year. Before I move on, I want to take a moment to recognize a number of people that were absolutely key to the successful launch of the MyRide project. From time to time, as we first presented the pilot in Transit Day of last year, through the launch, and during the operation and evaluation stages of the pilot, these staff members have been fully engaged and have worked tirelessly to make this as successful as possible for our customers. The number of names alone on this slide is a true testament and an indicator of how much work, energy, and collaboration has gone into managing a change such as this. I would also like to sincerely thank the transit managers who work so closely with their staff to make this project a success. With council approval, we've also recently introduced a number of fare programs designed to encourage customers to try transit and improve fare affordability. In Waterdown, we ran a Try Transit promotion until the end of December. We've introduced free fares for children 6 through 11 using a Presto card, and we've reduced the number of rides to help our regular users earn free fare faster on the Weekly Pass program. One of the other implementations that we did this past year was make sure that our Presto machines were installed on board DARTS vehicles for accessible transportation users, which is an important part of service equity. It also positions us well for fare integration activities across the GTHA. The most important benefit of Presto is the customer experience. It puts the power of managing fare products into the customer's hand. It provides a contactless payment method during the pandemic and provides customers buying options for when they choose to reload and buy media on their card. They no longer have to go to a bricks and mortar location. So in blizzard-like conditions like what we all experienced on Monday, people are able to simply reload their cards from home. So in addition to the items just discussed, and while continuing to operate in the ever-changing landscape because of the pandemic, I'm sure you'll agree that transit was successful in continuing to move forward on many major initiatives in 2021. While these council priorities are undoubtedly familiar to us, I'd like to step away from the use of the term priorities for a moment and look at them rather as value statements. These really tell us the story of what we value as a community. We value a city that promotes full participation through equity and inclusion. We value the environment and having robust municipal infrastructure. And we value our people, our residents and employees alike, and support a city where people are connected to jobs, the economy, and leisure. But what role does transit play in these? Well, transit ticks off every one of those boxes. everything we value in our city. The true value of transit can be seen as a city bus drops kids off at school and takes them home at the end of their academic day to their families. It helps our essential workers get to and from work while stopping to pick up groceries on the way. It's putting your bike on the front of the bus so that you can access the mountain climber. Simply put, one thing we know for sure is that the true value of transit will never be found at the bottom of the fare box. Since we value transit and what it does for our community, then we need to understand that transit will need more support in the coming years ahead. This is unilaterally true for transit agents everywhere. First of all, COVID is going to be a multi-year problem that will take us some time to come out of. And it's going to take patience if we continue to experience additional waves, such as we've seen with Delta and Omicron. We need continued support to provide consistent service to our customers. Operating issues on the immediate horizon include the Mountain Transit Center, which is now well over capacity. There is no more room for expansion. To grow our system, to be ready for light rail, our new maintenance and storage facility is absolutely necessary and will position us very well for future growth. Back when the 10-year local strategy was introduced in 2015, it was already noted back then that the MTC was at capacity.
You relax right there.
And this has continued to illustrate the need for the new garage. While the second maintenance facility should be ready in 2025, as we are already over capacity, one of the issues we'll be dealing with in the short term is a contingency plan for where to park our expansion buses over the next 3 years. While we look forward to the future of transit, we know that the council priorities guide our decision making and make sure that we can develop intentional strategic plans for the future of transit. We appreciate the advocacy work done by the mayor and this council at the provincial and federal level on the matters of continued and stable funding for transit. Issues on the horizon impacting transit's future include working towards a fully integrated, accessible transportation system and having a transportation network that has been redesigned through re-envision, supporting the voice of the customer and getting us ready for light rail. Transit plays a vital role in the city's continued commitment to achieving net zero by greening our fleet and providing an environmentally sound transportation choice for customers. Fare integration activities and service integration activities support ease of regional movement, but must also be done with municipal input to protect our fare box revenue. Despite all the challenges and issues ahead of us, 2021 was in fact a very good year for us here in Hamilton. There was significant, historical, transformational investments in Hamilton's transit system that has positioned us well for the future. Hamilton is the grateful recipient of $500 million of funding through the federal and provincial government. This much needed funding will support transformational projects through the ISIP fund. For example, the Birch Avenue Bridge, the new MSF, and the penultimate project, of course, the B-Line LRT. Investments in transit from all three levels of government are vital to the overall health of the system and the desired future state of the system. These investments represent tangible benefits that will fund the 10-year local transit strategy, providing support for replacement and expansion buses, support the build of the new garage, strengthen our reserves by offsetting the local amount required for replacement buses and funding reserves at estimated future dollar costs, enhance safety, both to the betterment of our customers and employees by improving our on-road communication tools. It improves the customer experience by continuing to implement a suite of transit priority measures along the A-line. And finally, it creates multimodal transportation opportunities supporting active travel connections, which connects with Vision Zero's and Complete Street undertaking. So where do we go from here? What are the next phases of implementing improved transit? The next phase is the continued build out of the last network to help us be rapid ready and prepare our system for light rail. But as we work towards the rather technical processes necessary to plan, construct, and route and schedule, we must also tune our minds to the voice of the customer. One of the most important things to get right when building our transit system is understanding what customers want and need. And our Re-envision project focuses exactly on that. Through our robust public engagement, our customers have been very clear. They want transit to be affordable. And for every rise at the gas pump, we remain ready to be your affordable option. The gap between affordable car ownership and affordable transit, it widens each day. And make no mistake about it, we are ready to pick you up when you are ready to ride. Customers want buses that are on time, not early, not late. They want to minimize transfers, which makes sense because transfers are potential pressure points where trips can be disrupted. Customers also want public transit spaces to receive the same treatment of importance of other public spaces with intentional and curated amenities that create accessible, safe, clean spaces to wait with garbage receptacles, lighting, and seating. Bike racks promote multimodal options. These are all things that make transit better. Coincidentally, these are also the hallmarks of complete streets, which make the communities better overall, safer, and more livable. Making transit an attractive option is not only how we keep our existing customer base, but how we attract new riders onto the system. Last year, we introduced you to the 6 guiding principles that were outputs from the Re-envision public engagement. Re-envision has been set back slightly as a result of COVID-19 complications because of the cessation of in-person engagement and operational priorities, including staffing redeployments. But staff continued to work on moving the project forward. In November of 21, we shared an information report to Council that outlined our recovery and ridership growth strategy, and we included a brief update on the Re-envision project. The report marked a substantial validation of the 6 guiding principles through virtual stakeholder engagement and other programmatic progresses despite the project delays, including things like the My Ride pilot, the pole bench prototypes, and a travel log, travel study, and continued ongoing engagement to listen to the voice of our customer. So while public engagement was paused in person, we continued to move steadily forward. We've advanced to a point now where we're drilling down from the guiding principles and turning them into desired outcomes with operating principles. These combined will create the roadmap for how we're going to do business and our commitment for our customers and employees alike. So to illustrate how this works, we'll use an example of the guiding principle, customer experience is at the heart of what we do. Each guiding principle has a desired outcome. In this case, it's be easy to use at every step of the journey. The whole customer journey from start to finish is easy for customers to understand. Then that will shift into the operating principle. And for example, one of the operating principles here are that we will continuously improve information that is available to customers. In total, our 6 guiding principles have 19 desired outcomes and 46 operating principles. While in draft, our next steps will be to socialize these with the public and employees alike before making further recommendations. Because of COVID, we have had to update the Re-envision project timeline in terms of public engagement and the network redesign. The network redesign was also temporarily paused during the decision-making process for LRT because the outcome has planning and operational outcomes. However, we have once again commenced this valuable work with McMaster University's engineering department. We will be back before Council with an information report on the detailed project status and the timeline for the necessary network reconfiguration, which has been adjusted back to spring of 2023. Maintaining our fleet in a state of good repair is one of Transit's strategic directions and frankly is of critical importance to meet our daily service requirements. HSR is in a truly enviable position. The city already operates one of the greenest fleets in Canada. 49% of our buses are already natural gas, with the council direction to replace the remainder of those by 2025-26. In 2022, we will retire an additional 50 diesel buses, replacing them with natural gas. This will bring our fleet to approximately 70% natural gas by the end of this year. Also noteworthy, by the end of 2022, all of our 60-foot articulated buses will be natural gas as well. Over the years, we have built an exceptional partnership with Enbridge, who supported the deployment of the very first renewable natural gas bus in Ontario. This pilot was very successful, and we're extending it through 2022 as we continue to explore the market shift for the potential renewable natural gas as we continue on our path to net zero. The migration to net zero is a progression along a continuum. We are in an excellent starting position, given that by year's end, we will only have a remainder of 30% of our fleet on diesel. This is a direct result of the excellent decision made by council to retire diesels early and transition to natural gas early in the trajectory. Fuel propulsion systems are undergoing exponential technological advances, and electrification is a hot topic. Preparation for electric buses takes a significant amount of work. It is not simply the purchase of the vehicle. We are working on an information report for council to share with you the many considerations on moving forward with electrification, because electric buses will need to be based out of our new garage. It requires a different skill set for the mechanics, and we also need to have a different way of routing because of how we charge and the range limitations of the vehicles. So there's lots to consider, and we look forward to reporting back on that at a future council meeting. As part of the GTHA, the connectivity between Hamilton and Toronto is vital for economic prosperity in the region. The Metrolinx Regional Transportation Plan highlights the forecasted growth in the area and the need for a regional approach to transportation to effectively move people. We've seen enhancements on the GO Transit service from the West Harbour GO system and Connect to GO buses and GO Transit and to Via Rail. We know that the province is committed to service integration in the region, as well as fare integration to make travel easier for our customers. Transit reviews our existing service routes and schedules to GO terminals to make connections to customers easier, and we factor that into our service planning process. Looking ahead to 2022, there's several major initiatives on the horizon. We'll be looking at continuing down the path of ridership recovery. We'll be implementing Year 6. We'll be working on ISIT project launches. We'll be working on the Accessible Transportation Services eligibility review and our path to net zero, including options on electrification. We will evaluate our on-demand transit, including considering areas for potential expansion, and we'll be undertaking significant work on our network redesign. We'll be looking at a service assessment, digging down into our existing service offerings while considering equity and inclusion. Are our service meeting the needs of residents? Do they align with the needs-based demographics? And finally, performance and people. Our staff have been working under extreme conditions for years, and during that time, important training and professional development opportunities tend to fall by the wayside. We need to invest in the development of our staff. The customer voice is quite clear on what they want, and we know that we need to develop and invest in our staff to properly deliver on the promise of service excellence. Our staff are worthy of investment too. It can't just all be buses and service hours. We need to make sure that they have the skills for tomorrow. For example, should we electrify? That is totally different from the combustion engines that our staff are used to working on. So ultimately, as we head into the numbers behind the budget, keep in mind there's people investment too, and that is imperative given all of our work ahead. So now that we've covered what we're going to do in 2022, let's move into the budget. We are pleased to start off with noting we've received some funding assurances from both the provincial and federal government in terms of Safe Restart funding and from the provincial government on gas tax allocations. This will provide us some much needed support as we continue with ridership recovery. The provincial government has already announced that Phase 3 Safe Restart money that was left over in December of 2021 can be carried forward to cover any deficits up until the end of 2022. Additionally, 120 million was added to the provincial gas tax fund to fully fund it for 21-22. Even better news is it's been confirmed that the proportionate share of gas tax funds will in fact be based on 2019-2020 ridership levels. The continuation of these programs from other levels of government have provided us with financial security in times still punctuated with fluctuations in ridership. COVID will continue to impact transit into 2023, and continued funding from senior level of government will remain necessary. The Transit Division is presenting a maintenance budget that includes the annualization of Year 5 and the phasing in of Year 6 of the approved 10-year local transit strategy. Overall, Transit's requesting an 8.8% increase in the 2022 budget cycle. Now let's pause for a moment and acknowledge that our ridership has been greatly impacted by the pandemic over the last 2 years. And we're heading into the third year of destabilized ridership. And therefore, our revenues have also been impacted as well. Some may question why the need for additional investment in transit under such circumstances. But this is precisely and exactly the time that we need to continue on our investment path. The pandemic has clearly illustrated how vital transit is to Hamiltonians. We cannot back down from the level of service that we offer. It is pivotal to the socioeconomic recovery of our region. The 10-year local transit strategy was Council's intentional approved plan as a vehicle to invest in transit after a period of time with little investment in fleet or service. The strategy was designed as a way to finance catch-up, to make up for the lean years and help promote growth and bring new customers to transit. All of the other factors and priorities, like the climate emergency, the desire to replace our diesel buses, the transportation master plan, the regional transportation plan, our city's growth projections, all of these are still in play, irrespective of the pandemic. And that's exactly why it is the correct time to stay our course and continue the investment. The bulk of the ask is tied to the local transit strategy, with the annualization of Year 5 and the implementation of Year 6 from September through December. Year 6 will bring an additional 13 buses, 43 FTE, and approximately 46 more service hours with a 5% increase to bolster revenues effective in end of August 2022. This investment makes up 58% of the total transit ask. The employee-related costs represent collective bargaining agreed to increases, including cost of living and step progression. Fuel, both natural gas and diesel, will continue to be commodities that we closely monitor through the year, and they are always at risk in a transportation setting. We mitigate those risks by strong contracting practices and strong reserve practices. Natural gas had a price increase, and we've also seen more natural gas buses come into our fleet. The city increased the price of diesel up to $1.10 per liter, which has been mitigated by a contribution from the Tax Stabilization Reserve Fund. The Transit Reserve Fleet inflationary increase is a budget protection mitigation strategy used to reserve for future costs of bus purchases. And insurance and vehicle charges are related to insurance premiums and the increased costs associated with fleet and licensing costs. The Presto increases are essentially commission-based that would only be realized if we meet ridership growth targets. And while accessible transportation services is not mentioned here as a key budget driver, that is because we have planned a 0% contracted increase, assuming that DARTS will hold the line at the 2021 budget. As we move forward into 2022, we will continue to have pressures because of COVID. We are forecasting a revenue shortfall of $11.4 million under the assumption that revenue will not fully return, that ridership will not fully return to pre-pandemic levels experienced in 2020. But please do remember, these revenue shortfalls are offset by the reassurance of carry forward of Safe Restart funding. Based on decreased demand, we're also forecasting a revenue loss in Traxi Script and charter services. And the COVID costs associated with PPE, enhanced bus cleaning, and facilities, incremental costs, those two are covered by the Safe Restart funding. In DARTS, we are expecting a forecasted saving because while we held them at 0% for 2022, we continue to expect a favorable variance, because we do not believe that accessible transportation services ridership will rebound at the same level as conventional, and therefore that budget will be able to will be able to net it against the corresponding challenges with the fare box shortfalls on the conventional side of things. So when we net all these cost pressures out, we are predicting a potential $5.8 million budget pressure arising from the ongoing impact of the pandemic. But do remember the good news that we have the permissible carryover of $11 million from the Safe Start Restart funding, and we're heading into 2022 with a $5.1 million buffer should any of these budgetary assumptions prove to be incorrect. Year 6 will continue to see continued investment in the local level of the glass network. This is absolutely critical work that must continue to leverage the investment from the other levels of government and help continue to prepare Hamilton to be rapid ready. So let's look at where our Year 6 investment will go and how it supports our objective of sustaining our existing customer base, growing transit ridership, and building out our transit network. In Year 6, Route 20 A line is a critical route for us. It was the second of the blast network lines to be introduced and continues to require investment to achieve the end goal of full build out and to support the growth it needs of the community, employment, and education partners. It is a key corridor for us to attract new riders. The A line supports connectivity with customers with planned residential growth down at Pier 8, connects both downtown GO stations, the McNabb Terminal, Mohawk College, and the commercial and employment growth in the Airport Employment Growth District. Route 20 is a key service support for the airport by getting employees out to the area and into the expanded distribution centers like DHL and the soon-to-be opened Amazon Fulfillment Center. Route 20 Year 6 enhancements will include weekday peak frequency improvements from 15 minutes down to 10, and evening and weekday operating every 30 minutes between 10:30 and end of service. The introduction of service on Saturdays for the full span, operating at 30-minute frequencies during early morning and evening periods and 15-minute frequency during the day. The Red Hill Business Park will also see investment. It represents a key and growing employment area within the city. While recent investments have allowed for improved connectivity between conventional transit to jobs in the South Business Park during peak periods, connectivity during non-peak, evening, and weekend periods has been dependent on connecting through a secondary service. Extending the route to the south of the business park during all the periods, we will eliminate redundant and overlapping routing along Stone Church that predates the existing route improvements and extensions of 21 and 43, placing the route operations in the appropriate area to align with where demand exists. We'll eliminate the inner line between routes 23 and 24, and that will provide improved operational efficiencies both now and during construction period as a standalone route, and will also open up opportunities to improve all three routes in the near future. It also provides opportunity to remove Transcab from this area in the future, should a coordinated effort be made to finding a turning point along the far south of Nebo Road. This has the potential to improve Transcab responsiveness in other areas where the service is provided. And lastly, the Stony Creek Mountain Service improvements. Route 43 Stone Church is one of the last routes that operates on the mountain, so it runs less frequently than the other mountain routes, and it's finally time to address that. The eastern end of the route has seen residential growth in recent years, and transit has yet to reach where those gaps in connectivity between the routes exist. So in year 6, the enhancements will include weekday peak frequency improvements from 30 minutes down to 20 minutes, a route extension during all periods of service to include Upper Centennial with additional connections with Route 44, Green Mountain Road, which is access to the residential growth area, and First Road north of Mud to access the sports fields. In the medium term, from 2023 to 2025, we'll be working on years 7 through 10 implementation of the 10-year local transit strategy. We'll be planning and operationalizing our new garage and actively working through LRT constructions while planning for operation and implementing the redesigned network and working towards building an integrated and accessible transportation system. The years ahead are rich with opportunity and change. The area of focus will be a shift away from our current treatment of things like re-envision and the network redesign and the 10-year local transit strategy, as we tend to see these things as very standalone projects. We look at them as projects that start and that stop. And while that is very much the right approach to how to get things moving, to do catch up, we are now shifting towards needing to keep things moving. So in order to do so, you're going to start seeing a shift in approach. Re-envision's outcomes are going to be how we do business. The network redesign will continue to evolve, with the 10-year local transit strategy scheduled to complete in 2026. We're then planning on moving into 5-year budget cycles. And the first time you'll see that is the 2024 budget cycle, where we introduce a budget forecast for 27 through 31. All of this is to say that our system will never be stagnant again, and it will be in a state of ongoing continuous improvement and investment from this point on. Looking ahead to year 7, fast forward to this, and we can see it'll be another 49,000 service hours, 14 additional expansion buses, and 43 FTE with a 5% fare increase coming in. In year 7, our investments will be in Lower Stony Creek and building our capacity on the blast network, with particular emphasis on weekend service improvements. We will also be managing service changes to mitigate light rail transit construction. Moving into years 8 through 10, and based on the current investment timeline, this will take place between 2024 to 2026. Spread over this 3-year period, we will add an additional 44 buses to the fleet, 135 new jobs, and approximately an additional 155,000 hours of service. In each of these years, a 5-cent fare increase is planned, resulting in 15% over the 3 years. Those years, 8 through 10, have an estimated cost of $18.6 million. Years 8 through 10 are going to be crucial for the evolution of transit in the community. LRT construction will be well underway and will be focused on LRT operation, which is forecasted to be 27-28. The impact of construction on the city and our existing customers is unavoidable, and we recognize that 80% of our routes and 90% of our customers will be impacted at various phases of construction. So during 24 to 26, transit will have the job of carefully balancing further investments into building out our blast network, ensuring that our transit network is ready to tie into LRT, while developing flexible scheduling and routing strategies which can be responsive to the construction schedule. The service must support customers during this time because we need to be maintaining our existing and adding new riders, all while leading up to the B train operation. Beyond LRT construction, other construction projects have also been identified for these future years in the capital budget, excuse me, that will impact key transit corridors within the city, all in areas of high volume and high demand routes that are significant to the blast network. For example, Barton, Upper James, Rymel, the Kenilworth access, and Main Street west of James. During this time, we will also be splitting transit operations between the MTC and the newly to be built maintenance and storage facility at 281 Birch Ave. This change alone is going to impact every aspect of our operation, from scheduling to routing to the very real workflow changes that will be required to support having multiple depots. But these years are also crucial in ensuring that the service on the road is maintained, sustainable, and attractive to the customers. Ultimately, years 8 through 10 will be about balance, sustaining our service through construction and growing ridership so that when LRT is ready to go, the bus network seamlessly integrates these two forms of transit into Hamilton's master transit system. While 2021 was not without its challenges, it was also a watershed year for the City of Hamilton with historic investments in transit from higher levels of government. Locally, this council has taken great strides through the 10-year local transit strategy to invest and improve the existing service. It is the combined power of investment that has positioned transit in Hamilton for the future. Our main focus in transit is to continuously improve the service of today, grow our ridership, and plan and prepare for the service of tomorrow. We have the tools in place to build a strong transit network for Hamilton that makes transit not only an attractive choice, but people's first choice. This concludes the Transit Day presentation for 2022, and I thank you for your time. The deck was long, but I truly hope that you found it an informative display of where we currently are and where we are headed. Thank you.
Thank you, Maureen. So could you just take your presentation down? Thank you. You can catch your breath now and have a drink of water, because I see you had trouble keeping your throat clear. And we'll open it up for questions. And so far, I have a speakers list of Partridge, Powers, Pearson, Danko, and Jackson. So Councillor Partridge.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And Maureen, I'll give you just a second to catch your breath there. That was quite a presentation. Thank you. I've only got a couple of questions on the on-demand for Waterdown. I understand you did mention a report is coming forward in April. And is it safe to assume that the majority of the information about the on-demand will be coming forward in April?
Yes, it is safe to assume that that's when we'll present the majority of information. Yep.
So my question is, it's a one-year pilot, and the pilot started in September. So why a report in April and not closer to June?
So it's an update report for you in April, and then we can make future recommendation reports as required. What we know already from the Waterdown pilot project is it has been very successful. There's certainly areas of opportunity to be learned, but there are also opportunities to look to implement it elsewhere in our system.
You know, and I appreciate that. Thank you, Chair, because I mean, it certainly hasn't been smooth from day one. It was quite rocky for the first couple of months, but I really appreciate the transit staff, and my compliments to them under your leadership, Maureen, because they did call residents back and spoke to them directly, assisted them on how to maneuver the on-demand package. And I think if there was one challenge that didn't seem to get rectified, it was on the residents that it was to do with accessibility. And I'm wondering if you remember that one, if you could just speak to that. Because accessibility is it's a pretty big deal when it comes to transit. So I'm not quite sure why the on-demand couldn't accommodate. But do you remember? Can you speak to that or no?
Through you, Chair, I'm going to have to ask for clarification on which aspect of accessibility you're referring to, Councillor Partridge.
Yeah, and I can't remember, to be quite honest with you, but I know that staff did spend a fair bit of time. I believe it was Jay Adams that had spoken to the resident. But you know, if you want to just put that question forward for April, then we can probably get more. I don't want to put you on the spot, but get more information at that point. The you mentioned about the free fares and the Presto that were offered in Waterdown. What was the feedback on that like?
So I will defer that question to Nancy Purser, the manager of support services at HSR.
Thank you. And Nancy has been very, very helpful on this project as well.
Nancy?
Good morning, Nancy Purser, Manager of Transit Support Services. We are still just accumulating all of our data on the free fares from 5 a.m. to 10 a.m. in Waterdown. From what we early glean of that, we did increase some ridership in that time, but of course, Omicron hit at the same time, so it probably, you know, we could have seen better numbers, but we'll have more to report in the April report.
Yeah, thank you, Nancy. And Chair, you know, the on-demand really started with a public meeting of all the employers at Clapison, included membership from L3, Stryker, Liberty, Environics. There was, you know, 45, I think, attended that meeting. Maureen, this was just before your time. But the numbers of riders getting into the west end of Clapison, that was pretty important, really, to be the foundation for on demand. How are we doing with those numbers? And again, maybe Nancy's better to answer that one.
I think that will fall under the area for Jason Vanderhyde, the manager of planning and infrastructure.
Right, Jason. Yes, thank you.
Welcome, Jason.
Hi, everybody. Jason Vanderhyde, manager of transit planning with the HSR. Similar to Nancy's response, I think we'll be able to come back in April and provide some detail, a level of detail in terms of kind of the splits of origins and destinations that we're seeing through the first 6 months of the pilot at that point in time.
Okay, so I guess I'll wait till April. A couple of other things. The project with Metrolinx, the BRT bus rapid transit, it's a project that I've been working on with Metrolinx for the past couple of years, and it's going to be connecting Waterdown to Finch. So it's quite a lengthy route, and Finch to Waterdown. And one of the things that we're looking at is I've asked them to look at continuing that BRT down into connecting with Hamilton, because right now there is no connection to Hamilton between Waterdown other than through the Aldershot Go. Are you familiar with that project? I would assume you would be, but I need to ask that question, Chair.
Through you, Chair. Yes, we are familiar with some of the ongoing service integration initiatives that Metrolinx is currently working on.
Okay, thank you, because we are on the second round of public input at this point over the next couple of weeks. The other thing there were two other areas I wanted to touch on just very quickly.
Councillor, you are at your 5 minutes. If you can wrap up shortly, that'd be great. Keep going. Otherwise, I can put you back on the speakers list.
Just two things. The Waterdown Road expansion, which is part of the bypass. There will be some rerouting for the bus, and also the Grindstone Bridge, which is just east of Mill Street the bridge is scheduled to come out in 2024 and 2025, which will shut down Dundas Street for 8 months. And I just, if I could get a comment from you, Maureen, just, you know, your awareness of that and, you know, what part of the process you're in right now.
So our planning and infrastructure team routinely scans the long-term projects that are on the horizon where we know routing will be impacted for significant public works for an extended period of time. So we will develop a contingency plan for that as the construction approaches.
Jason, you had your hand up too?
Through the chair, I was just going to mention that in our recommendation to launch the My Ride on-demand pilot, it was one of the considerations on why we wanted to test the feasibility of this type of service offering and the flexibility that the technology we believe will provide us in essentially augmenting routing on the fly to mitigate what the impacts are to customers when we see those large construction projects in Waterdown.
Thank you, Jason, because it will be significant to have Dundas Street, which is the main artery, closed down for 6 to 8 months. Thank you, Chair. I appreciate the latitude.
Okay, thank you. Let's move on now to Councillor Powers.
Thank you to all of you. My apologies if you hear some rumbling in the background, but Electra is tearing the road up right in front of my my window right at the present time. I have a singular question at the moment. First off, Maureen, thank you very much for the extensive presentation. It follows in the tradition of past transit presentations where it answers a lot of questions and triggers a lot of questions. So mine is with regards to the 8.8% increase ask. My thinking is, and perhaps you can clarify this, is about $4.1 million of that ask is in achieving the year 6 targets that is outlined in the 10-year local transportation strategy. Is that indeed the case?
Through you, Chair. Excuse me. What you're seeing there in the 4.1 is the year 5 annualization for the January through August timeframe. So money
Okay.
that has already been spent, and then the proportionate section of the year 6 implementation from September through December.
Okay. Okay.
That's it?
That's it, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Just give me a second here to get the chat disappear. There it is. Councillor Pearson.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor, and thank you, Maureen. Excellent presentation. And as always, we certainly know that there are challenges with regards to COVID, and you're absolutely right when you say that this is the time to do the things we should be doing to upgrade and continue to improve our transit system. So a couple of questions I wanted to ask, because you touched on in one of the slides about, you know, the Red Hill Parkway expansion servicing to the Mount Hope area and the airport with regards to Amazon. So I guess I'm going to come in as a questioning service expansion, and I've been after it for some time now for my industrial area in Ward 10. So I have businesses in Ward 10 that are being, and we have tried to service some of them. And I think I will ask that we go offline and talk about this later and see what we can do in meeting the needs of these businesses. So I have Dell Windows and Doors. I have Venetian Meats just opened on Lewis Road. And I have Amazon at Barton and Glover. So, you know, these are also, you know, very large businesses and employers in Ward 10 who, unfortunately, due to economic times, a lot of their workers do not have vehicles and they are reliant on transit. So I'm just going to ask, are these areas, have you got, especially the Amazon, on your radar?
Maureen or Jason, I'm not sure who would take that.
Through you, Chair. I will defer to Jason or Manager Vanderhyde on that one.
Thank you, Jason. Oh, no. Good morning, Jason. Thank you.
Good morning. Through the chair, yes, we are very aware of Amazon. And in fact, we had a meeting with the Amazon partners for both facilities just in the last 2 weeks. The I guess the difference in the distribution center that's on Upper James versus the one in Stony Creek is just the size of the workforce at this point in time. On Upper James at peak build out and around July and towards the end of the year when they're at full demand, they're expecting to have about 5,000 employees in their workforce, where Stony Creek is significantly less than that. However, we are in ongoing discussions with the folks down in Stony Creek as well about the service offering there, what their employees are aware of. And as Maureen had alluded to in her presentation, year 7 for us is really a highlight year in focusing on your area and the needs that we are aware of. We thank you. I think I've thanked you in previous presentations for your patience, but as we look to year 7, that's really a focus on the lower Stony Creek area and how we can improve transit in that area.
And thank you for that, Jason. And I know, we met, I think it was just briefly after the last election as far as expansion with Debbie Delavadova and yourself in riding the area, especially the residential area on the north side of the QEW. And part of that routing and review was the opportunity to see how we can improve transit on the South Service Road, Arvin Avenue, Barton Street. So I appreciate that still is on the radar because I keep telling businesses and residents we are working on them. I know Transit HSR has also purchased smaller buses that are being tested, if I'm not mistaken. Are they like 30 passenger buses, if I'm not mistaken? And they're out there currently. So that was one thing that we were looking at, the possibility of servicing Ward 10. Maybe you can just clarify.
Through the chair, that's correct. We do have a small complement of smaller vehicles. They're 30 foot in length versus the traditional 40 foot or 60 foot articulated buses. And those are the ones that we are operating currently in Waterdown, on the Dundas local route and some of the other lower demand routes. But certainly, as I said, in year 7, the focus is projected to be in your area, and that would include how we service all areas, industrial and residential, as far east as 50 Road, Winona Crossing area.
Thank you. So I guess I'm going to just ask a dumb question, but year 7, so we're looking at 2023?
Fall of 2023 at present would be the should council continue to support investment and approve the strategy, fall of 2023 would be when those implementations would take place. Super,
thank you for that. And I guess I just have one other question, and it's overlapping on Councillor Partridge's questions with regards to the on-demand in Waterdown. And I just received an email that I believe will be going on to the next agenda. But can you just enlighten me on questioning on demand for senior citizens over 80, they don't pay. Is that correct? Similar to any other bus service?
That is correct.
Thank you, Maureen. And how about Transcab? Do seniors over 80 pay for Transcab when they board the buses currently? And ask for Transcab service to take them further.
I'm going to ask Nancy to answer that as our expert on fare revenues.
And I know that the charge would be 50 cents. That's to take them the further distance. Nancy, thank you. Good morning.
So good morning. Through the chair, at this point, Transcab is still an augmented service and it is not free. The 50 cents is still payable no matter what age you are.
Okay. Because it is an augmented service, but this on demand is really not considered an augmented service. It's more of a pilot project, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Thank you for that. I appreciate the answers to the questions and thank you for the great presentation today.
Okay, let's move on now to my chat keeps disappearing on me. There we go.
Councillor Pearson?
Councillor Pearson just finished. Councillor Danko.
Or sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. Just a couple questions this morning. It is good to see the priority for year 6 on the Route 20A line. and really appreciate the highlights, the connecting to the both GO stations, downtown, the Upper James corridor, and the airport, especially in the context of our decision of firm urban boundary. We're seeing a huge increase in attention to the Upper James corridor and development, and a lot of that development is specifically when we're talking about parking ratios and densities, is definitely dependent on the development of high order transit along the A-line Upper James and James Street corridor. So my question on that is I think it was the 2019 actually, there was $8.5 million that was specifically allocated through ISIP funding to implement priority bus corridor service along that stretch. So in addition to the work in the year 6 transit strategy, what work is ongoing working towards that priority corridor service level? And also, as part of that work, it was a review of the roadway geometry, working towards a complete streets initiative for the corridor. Do you have an update on that?
Through you, Chair. That's a great question, Councillor Danko, and I will defer to Jason Vanderhyde for the details, but we have certainly continued to put significant investment into the A-line in last September and again coming for next September, and it has received funding for transit priority measures. You're correct. So I'll have Jason provide you an update on the specifics.
Through the chair, I'll start by saying that we were thankful to get the approvals on the ISIP funding this past year, and certainly that has unlocked the door for that work to begin. We will be administering that work as the holder of the funding administration. But I am going to pass this off and defer over to Brian Hollingworth, who's with us today, whose team will actually be leading that particular ISIP project.
Yes, thanks, Jason. Brian Hollingworth, Director of Transportation Planning and Parking. There's a number of things ongoing for the A-line. As you mentioned, Councillor Danko, there is the $8.5 million, and that is to cover a number of initiatives, including physical improvements at 4 to 5 intersections to widen them out for transit priority. Transit priority at 26, transit signals at 26 intersections, some streetscaping and other improvements. There's also the overarching study, which you referenced, to look at the long-term needs of the corridor in terms of right-of-way space. And both of those projects were in the process of developing terms of references and hiring consultants to do the work. I would also just mention briefly that Metrolinx has also been helping out to do a proof of concept study, to do some modeling, to look at optimizing solutions for transit priority, and that work is now reaching a conclusion. So lots of work going on the A-line. Stay tuned.
That's really encouraging to hear. Appreciate that. As I mentioned, A-line really is the key spine, the north-south spine, as B-line is the east-west spine, and it's going to be a key component to our intensification and our urban planning moving forward. So it's really great news. Appreciate that. My follow-up question, Mr. Chairman, was on another pilot that was launched this year that I didn't hear in the presentation. Maybe I just missed it, but that was on the the free transit for children 12 and under. I was just wondering if Director Cousin-Heath might be able to give an update on that. I know we're just into it, but I think that was a really exciting initiative for families.
Through you, Chair. Yes, we did launch the Presto, the Fare Incentive Program, free fare for children 6 through 12. It did launch recently. Stats are in early phases, but you'll remember at Council, we have positioned it as a 1-year pilot, and you extended it beyond the 1-year period so that there would be no gap in service between when it ended and when we were able to bring back a recommendation to Council. In case it became permanent, there'd be no gap to people that have chosen to take up that opportunity. So it certainly is a key step in making transit more affordable for families. And as we move towards hopefully recovery from the pandemic, it is one more way to support people in our community on that journey.
Thank you so much. Appreciate the time, Mr. Chairman.
Anytime. So we'll move on now to Councillor Jackson.
Good morning, Deputy Mayor Ferguson. Thank you. Deputy Mayor Ferguson, I have probably 7 or 8 questions of clarification or more information, so please feel free to put me on a second time. First of all, Director Cozen-Heath, baptism of fire coming in to our city when you did to this position in your first year or so. A job well done. I commend you and your management team. And above all, our workers, our frontline workers, especially the drivers. And I want to praise ATU President Eric Tuck and his executive team and all the drivers. To think, Deputy Mayor Ferguson, for about a year from when March of 2020, the pandemic hit in serious form in our community in the province of Ontario, until a year later, I think it was, you can correct me if I'm wrong, Director, but in the spring of last year, almost a full year, that HSR drivers and public transit workers were not declared essential by the province of Ontario. And I just found that mind-boggling. And in spite of that, Deputy Mayor, our 700 plus employees at the HSR just kept marshaling forward, and I just commend them so much. Okay, that's my opening complimentary remarks. I have a series of questions, Director, and if you can answer them, great. If one of your managers, that's fine. You mentioned about the clean and green fleet we have, and you went out of your way to highlight, and I've always felt that way as we ultimately move towards electrification of the entire fleet. But you mentioned about, I think, 50% are CNG, compressed natural gas. Yet amongst the environmental leaders, I'll say, in our community, I don't hear too much praise about the fact that our public transit fleet is clean and green. Do you want to maybe just expand upon that for public consumption through you, Deputy Mayor Ferguson, to the Director?
Certainly. Go ahead, Maureen.
Through you, Chair. I do think it is incredibly important that we in Hamilton recognize what an enviable position we are at with our fleet. By the end of 2022, we will be at almost 70% natural gas. There are many transit agencies across Canada who are nowhere near that on a path to net zero journey, that still have fleets substantially rooted in diesel buses, and they have incredible capital expenses to get their fleet anywhere near where we are already sitting. So I think that's one of our true benefits. Why, maybe we need to talk about it more. Maybe we need to be more loud and proud about the state of our fleet. We've had great success here in Hamilton with natural gas, and that's largely because council made that decision a long time ago to start moving towards getting rid of those diesel buses. And where we are now is we are realizing the rewards of those early decisions. So I think we just need to maybe take a little more of a victory lap approach on being pleased with the status of our fleet as it is currently.
Well, thank you. From your professional standpoint, Director, that's wonderful to hear because, of course, in the community, Environment Hamilton and other great agencies and individuals with environmental doctorates behind their names are constantly pushing us, especially towards electrification across the board. But thank you very much for that statement. Another question, Deputy Mayor Ferguson, a big one for me, Director, and Manager Vanderhyde knows that I like to meet with him regularly. On your slide 34, you had a bullet point about bus stops as a public space. My ideal, and I hope it's the HSRs, I believe it is, I know at least in my East Mountain community, where there is a bus pad, ideally, it's great to have the amenities of a shelter, of a bench, and of a garbage receptacle. But that isn't necessarily the case. And there may be logistical reasons where on a strip of roadway, the road allowance doesn't allow the width to have all those amenities. But I would hope that as much as possible, we're working towards that end. Can you give me some feedback on that, or Manager Vanderhyde, Director, please?
Jason?
Through the chair, you're absolutely correct. In some cases, we are constrained by the public right of way. That being said, we do have our expansion programs in which we are trying to increase the amount of coverage we have. And in 2022, we're actually going to be undertaking an audit, if you will, on our entire network, on the right-of-way constraints to see what our capacity limit is to grow our amenities at stops and identify our approach going forward to filling those gaps.
Because I believe, Manager, Deputy Mayor, I believe that came out in survey after survey on the re-envisioning program that the former director launched. I believe that came out constantly of safe spaces at the bus shelters, at the bus pads, weather protected as well in inclement weather times. So I don't want to lose track of that. And maybe Manager Vanderhyde, as we've done every year, my office can set up with you a time to see exactly the status of the existing shelters and those amenities at those existing shelters and new ones that are planned for 2022. Through you, Deputy Mayor Ferguson, is that possible, please?
Through the chair, we can certainly set up that meeting with your office.
Thank you very much. Another question. Director, I didn't quite understand the comparison of DART's financials versus the HSR. On your slide 45 and on slide 46, you show that there is a shortfall of 11 million with the HSR fare box revenue, but with the DARTs, there's a savings overall. And I'm trying to understand, and if I didn't hear you clearly, the messaging I took, Deputy Mayor, was that Councillor Jackson, DARTs, the service and the demand for DARTs is going to decrease continuously during the pandemic, whereas we're hoping a rebound with conventional transit. It seemed to not reconcile for me. There was a paradox there, like are less and less seniors and those with disabilities there during the pandemic, they're not going to use DARTs anywhere near as much as they would, but the everyday rider will rebound and hopefully use our public transit more. Maybe the director can help me reconcile that, what seems to be a paradox, Deputy Mayor.
Go ahead, Maureen.
Through you, Mr. Chair. To clarify, so the DARTs riders are people with differing accessibility issues. Some have significant medical challenges, and there's medically necessary trips like to dialysis or to treatment programs. There's also adult day programs which have not reopened yet. So there's a number of destinations that users of ATS services use that when they are going to fully reopen is not known. So that is why we don't expect the DARTs ridership to rebound as quickly potentially as conventional ridership, because it is a different population with different needs that we need to be respectful of. So they will come back to travel when their programs reopen it based on the orders that are in place and based on the needs of their community.
Okay, I appreciate that explanation. So, Director, you're raising my comfort level that this isn't an opportunity to diminish the DART service permanently across our community. We're there for them once society gets through this stinking pandemic once and for all. Is that what I'm hearing overall?
Through you, Chair. Absolutely. This is not an appropriate time to decrease that budget. To do so would be short-sighted. We know they're going to come back, and we will be more than ready for them and willing and able when they do, and when it is safe for them to participate in their programs again. We absolutely are not recommending diminishing the DARTs budget.
Thank you, Director, for that reaffirmation. Deputy Mayor, how am I doing?
You're at 4 minutes and 56 seconds right now, and I try to stop every time there's an answer coming. Are you half done now?
No, I am half done, but I got 2 or 3 more questions. They'll take some time, so that's fine.
I'll come back to you, Councillor Clark.
Thank you.
Good morning, Deputy Mayor. I just have a quick question, and it's parochial in nature. respecting Route 43, the Stolen Church route. So thank you very much for the updating to the route in the manner that you did. It was something that I had been working with HSR staff on for since my reelection to council, because it became an issue that was brought to my attention. So you have addressed it, which is great. Can you tell me when you think that route change would actually occur? I understand year 6, but residents will say, when is it happening? So I'd like to be able to tell them.
Through you, Mr. Chair, our service changes take place in September with the fall board. So that's when the change would be implemented.
So that would be September 2022 then?
Correct, yes.
Excellent. That was really my only question. I want to thank the staff. This is really going to help us a great deal with the Heritage Green Sports Park in terms of getting folks in and out of that sports park. Thank you for your time. That's it, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So other than second-time speakers, there are no other speakers on the list. So I'm going to turn the chair over to Councillor Jackson if I can. And you can watch my 5 minutes too. And I only have one question, so it shouldn't take
Okay,
too long.
Councillor, you
So
have the floor.
I'm trying to reconcile in my mind why you think this is the right time to continue to invest in HSR. You said we're currently running at 44% of our previous peak ridership, which I guess was 2019. Is that correct?
The 2020, for you, Mr. Chair, 2019, 2020 is the baseline year that we're using to mark recovery, yes.
Okay, so you are now asking us to go to our taxpayers and put another 9% of increase in to the transit budget when we're running at half the ridership that we had pre-pandemic. And the world has changed on us. People are working from home. I know some people who used to go into an office every day, and their employer has got rid of those offices because they expect them to stay at home going forward, because the new technology is working very well. So you're looking to add 14 more buses and 43 more full-time drivers when we're running at less than half a capacity. And that, I just have trouble reconciling that. You know, if we pause this for another year to see what happens, because it's a changing world, and of course it's a moving target too, what's with the whole COVID impact is to us. You're also asking for 14 more buses, and I heard you in your presentation that you have no storage room left at Upper James. And I also heard you during your presentation, you say that the new garage down on Wentworth Street won't be ready until 2025. So would it not make more sense to wait and see what happens to ridership rather than guessing it? Allow the garage to proceed and have it come online to be able to store these long list of new buses that are coming in, you're proposing to come in, along with the new technology with electrification and so on. So I'm just having real trouble why we're going to spend another 9% on transit this year with ridership running at half of what it was before 2019, when we don't have the room to store these new buses anyway.
Director Cozen Heath, there are a few questions there, but I think a general theme from the councillor to you.
Through you, Mr. Chair. I can understand your hesitation, and I understand when ridership is low that it really does appear to be sort of a logical time to question whether or not you would pull back. And I am absolutely unequivocally here to tell you, you do not pull back. And it's vital for so many reasons. So when you look at the costs that we're asking for, remember a significant portion of them have already been spent. What the year 6 costs really are is the labor related costs associated with September through December. The year 5 buses have been purchased and are on their way. And the buses that you're talking about in terms of next year's acquisition, we are developing contingency plans right now for temporary parking on our site. We knew that the MTC was at capacity and have been planning for contingencies all the while. ridership is at a false low right now. We also believe it's at a false low because we have not seen the full return of our students at McMaster and at Mohawk. Schools are still virtual, online. They're still shifting around our high school students. So we do believe that there's a portion of our ridership that will be back relatively quickly as soon as the academic world stabilizes. We know that there is a potential change in the way some people work, but we don't know what those impacts are going to be. Also, I think with people now maybe only going into the office 1 to 2 days a week, they will choose transit as an option as opposed to having the carrying costs of a personalized motor vehicle if they're only having to go into the office a couple days a week. So I think you're right when you say we're going to see a shift. We are, and that's an opportunity for us to continue building our new customer base. With the LRT line coming in the years ahead, our system has to continue on its trajectory of growth and building up and being responsive for socioeconomic recovery and to be ready to support that B line when it is a fully functioning train in our city.
Okay, and I don't disagree with you that some of your ridership will come back. I'm just not sure all of them, and I don't think anybody can forecast what will come back. And because you have 50% of our capacity to absorb that group that may come back, I think we have a duty to the taxpayer just to watch that and see what happens. If it fully comes back, then let's go ahead. But skeptics will say, no, we're not. It's not worth me having another 8% of my tax bill, or 9%, 8.8%, when you're only carrying half the passengers you once did. So do you have at your fingertips? If not, then by all means, just put an email out to us afterwards. But I'd like to know the 2019 ridership, the current ridership, and what in year 6 was the forecasted ridership.
Director?
And through you, Mr. Chair, I do have that at my fingertips, but I also have 50 other pieces of paper at my fingertips. And I have,
Mr. Chair, I don't want to press Maureen to try to search through and find this. If she's got it, great. If not, I'm fully prepared to have it emailed out to members of council when she does have it done, because, you know, traditionally in the budget debates, we hear all the presentations. And of course, you know, Maureen's doing what she's supposed to do, which is to get the best shot forward she can to get funding for her area, but so is every other department. We saw police yesterday too, come in double the council guideline. And of course, this is 4 times the, 4.5 times the guideline we're seeing today from transit, from 2 to 9%. And so I just like, my sense, and I recall seeing the numbers as we were progressing through this 10-year plan, is that we weren't hitting the targets any year. And that's why it'd be nice to see when the 10-year plan was done, what was the 2022 targeted ridership? And you know, if we're half the 2019, we got to be way down from the 2022. But I'd like to be armed with those statistics before we go into the debate on the budget and go through what we're going to approve and not going to approve. Personally, what I'm going to do, I'm just going to target in on those that are above the 2% guideline. And this is the biggest one so far. And I'm not trying to be negative towards what HSR is trying to do. They're doing their job. I'm a little worried that they keep bringing up the 10-year transit plan. Well, it's really it was written 9 years ago, and our world has changed significantly in 9 years in a number of different ways. And so I just want those numbers to be able to satisfy in my mind that I need to go to the Ancaster taxpayers and ask them for a 9% increase in transit when we're running at half of what we were pre-pandemic. And, you know, a lot of the academic institutions are back now. Schools are all back. And, but of course you don't have those numbers yet because it's just happened. And I respect that. So if I can get those numbers from you, Maureen, and this is the end of my comment, Councillor Jackson, if I can get those numbers from you, it'll assist me when we go back to debate the overall budget again, and when Mike traditionally brings in where we're at and where we want to go to, and 0-1 on specific areas. So I look forward.
So Director, in Folsom, you could get that to the councillor, but do you have something as a snapshot right now, please?
Certainly, through you, Mr. Chair. Our ridership pre-pandemic ran in and around 22 million. And then down at the 50% mark is about 11 million. We anticipate by the end of 2022 being back up at 80% of our ridership. And again, once the students are back, when you're referring to public schools and Catholic schools, what we haven't seen yet is the return of the ridership from our post-secondary. And we do know that that is a rather significant piece of our ridership base. So we remain optimistic that the ridership will rebound certainly in 2022 and be much more favorable towards year end.
Okay, and so it's 22 million was in 2019. We're currently at 11, and you're forecasting based on 80% to 17.6 million. So we certainly, if you're not up to 2019 levels, you certainly got the capacity to handle the 17.6. But everybody's going to speculate depending on where their ideology or what they personally believe. I'd like to see some actuals in the end of 2022.
Okay.
And it's not like we're going to, if we don't bring on these 43 new employees, based on 17.6 million ridership, we're going to still have lots of capacity left from the 2019 levels. So I put that out there, food for thought. This will, of course, I suspect, I know with me, it'll be a significant debate when we start to consolidate the budget and bring it down and try to get to a level that, you know, what our taxpayers will accept out there when we finally ratify the total budget. So thanks for your time.
And that's your 5-minute speaking time. Right on, Councillor.
Perfect. So I'll take the chair back, and
thank you.
I don't think we have any other speakers. So if I go to my roadmap, we simply need a motion now to receive.
There are quite a few speakers, Councillor. Sorry.
I'm looking at it. And, okay,
you need
let
to
me
scroll.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm ready.
Yeah, I see it. So it's Mayor Fred, Councillor Nand, Councillor Jackson, Councillor Clark for a second time.
Yep.
So,
So you don't get the last word on this one. And I do thank Maureen for a great presentation and certainly a forward-thinking approach to transit. You know what, we've delayed the transit strategy a number of times as a result of the not finalized federal provincial investment, and we now know that $500 million that we committed to, our portion of, as well as the provincial portion and the federal portion, has been committed. And there's no question then once we're past this pandemic, and we will be past this pandemic, that ridership will grow and rebound and then grow beyond that as our community grows. And you know what, you cannot plan a transit system on a year-to-year basis. You have to look ahead. And so I'm fully appreciating that this is a good opportunity for us to fulfill the investments that we've already got on the books, that we've got commitments to, and kind of round out our transit system to be ready for that growth and development. So I'm excited about that. I just want to ask Maureen one more time to speak to, and you know, it reminds me as I'm listening, I think Councillor Jackson and I, and maybe Councillor Powers, were around when we were faced with a decision on whether or not to abandon the electrified trolley lines and go to natural gas. I think if I see some nodding of heads, it'd be a couple of us that were there at the time. An agonizing decision at the time that really spoke to whether or not we were going to spend tens of millions of dollars on replacing all the brass line hardware that needed to be replaced in the lower city to continue to run the trolley system, or go to a more adaptable and cleaner natural gas. And that decision has actually served us very, very, very well. And so we're now at a 75% natural gas system, which is infinitely cleaner than diesel. But we also want to get to head towards that ultimate electrification that is on the horizon and should be built into our next transit terminal as well. So to you, Maureen, thank you for the compliment on making a wise decision to go to natural gas, compressed natural gas. And you know, what is the future of electrification on our the remaining 25% and beyond. So I know there's an evolution of life cycle for vehicles, and there's a need to have charging and storage capacity. So where do you see the electrification of the balance of the fleet and beyond starting to occur on our traditional buses?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Electrification is a fascinating topic, and we will be bringing a report forth to council shortly with recommending on how we move forward into electrification. What we know is that electrification will be built into our second garage that we're building. The Mountain Transit Center is not capable of supporting electric, and it wouldn't make sense to spend money on retrofitting that site. It's more appropriate to kind of build out our new MSF as electric capable. We have a concept of starting with in and around 50 buses at the new MSF, not on day one, of course, but that would be sort of the target number of how many electric buses would operate. It requires significant work to plan for on our end, because when you get into things like on-street charging or in depot charging, depending on how you charge, means your routes need to be configured differently. So there is a significant overhaul and review of routes that would be running on electric. We have to think about the range. We have to think about the practicality of running an electric bus up a mountain. So there's significant undertaking to be done. But certainly electrification is a keen topic, and we look forward to bringing council more information on it in the very near future.
That is good, and I'll remind that the federal government has indicated in several occasions that they have resources that they would like to put forward to purchase electrified or electric buses. And knowing that there's a lead time to all of this, it may be wise for us to plan ahead on that opportunity as well, because I know the resources are there for them to offset the cost differential. Right now, electric vehicles, we know, are probably 20 or 30% more expensive, although that's coming down as more and more of the fleet turns into electric vehicles. So just want to encourage that you have a hard look at what the federal government has on the table in terms of resources to plan ahead for, I guess, 2025, when we could have augmented some of our fleet with electric vehicles. Beyond that, I want to compliment all of our transit drivers and operators. Some of the most steadfast folks that kept on working through the pandemic. We can put our transit drivers at the forefront of that. We can put our police officers at the forefront of that, our paramedics, our fire. All of them continued to work, not isolated, like many of us were able to do, but actually in public, keeping our community going to the best degree possible. And this council was gracious enough to also provide full employment and support for all of the drivers that we currently employ, even though we had a diminished transit system. This community did its part to try and keep our economy and our employees whole. And I am grateful for that, and I am grateful for the work our transit drivers have done. We owe them a debt of gratitude, and I know that we also provided a great opportunity for them to continue to do the work that they feel is so important in our community. So thank you, and I look forward to the next iteration of transit expansion between LRT now, which, when it's said and done, is probably a $5 billion investment for transit in the city of Hamilton when you add it all up, and a $500 million in traditional transit investments. We are taking a giant leap forward to the greater benefit of our community, not just today, but 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 30 years from now. This is forward-thinking planning that all communities should be doing, and I'm very glad we're in that space. So thank you for your leadership on that, and we will continue to work hard to realize those very important investments. Thank you.
Councillor Nan.
Thank you. Through you, Deputy Mayor. Also want to echo my thanks to Director Cozen-Heath. It's nice to experience your direct and clear leadership and also articulation of the transit moment that we're facing as a municipality. And also in your budget presentation, taking a clear stand about the need to invest now versus, I guess, what would be considered as an unfortunate move, which would be to fall back towards an austerity measure that would end up starving the system rather than growing it right at a peaked period when we need to be investing more heavily. I really appreciate the framework and the integration you brought today around integrating the role of HSR and transit in a socioeconomic recovery for the city, and not just for us as a municipality, but for our residents. And that's a level of clarity and leadership that I'm just absolutely appreciating today, and can't say thank you enough. Your comments also around the generational, you had mentioned, I'll say generational shift, but workers and professionals kind of contemplating what are the costs that they're willing to invest in moving forward versus the costs that, might be sitting in their driveways untouched for months through this pandemic in the form of a motor vehicle. I often hear from young people across the ward and across the city about how they will never opt into motor vehicle purchasing, and how I'm hearing also through studies that immigrants and younger folks are opting out of, though pre-pandemic might have considered purchasing a vehicle, since this pandemic are opting to use their money more wisely and differently, and opting then instead into transit. So it's a reality for many residents in our city, and I appreciate that articulation in today's presentation. Yeah, I guess the last question I had from a budget perspective, or the only question I had from a budget perspective, is you mentioned that the restart dollars are available until the end of the year, which is definitely good news. You clarified in your presentation that we're facing a $11 million fare box revenue shortfall. And is that what will be covered through the restart funds that we have left over through you?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, that's what the Safe Restart will cover.
Perfect, thank you. And finally, thank you to yourself, all HSR staff and drivers, for your ongoing service and dedication to our residents and public transit throughout the pandemic, but also through this past winter storm. Thank you.
Okay, looking at the chat, looks like it's Councillor Jackson for a second time.
Okay, thanks, Deputy Mayor Ferguson. Three more questions, Director Cozen Heath. On slide 49, I just want to get clear about the Upper Ottawa Route 22, improved access to employment, elimination of redundancies. As you know, the Route 22 south of Stone Church to Rymel cuts into the Red Hill Business Park along Hempstead and Unsworth, Lansing Drive, etc. So when I read the legend here, am I reading correctly, Director, that there still will be access for workers along the Route 22 going into the Red Hill Business Park, but you're going to offset that with the enhancement on Stone Church 43? Or am I misinterpreting, please? Because I don't want to lose any level of service into the business park for employees that use public transit now, but I just wasn't clear about what that chart was trying to show me, Deputy Mayor Ferguson.
Okay.
Through you, Deputy Mayor, I will have Jason Vanderhyde speak to the nuances of that change coming.
Thank you.
Jason?
Through the chair, thanks for your question, Councillor. So the area of the business park that you described, Hempstead, Unsworth, etc., is untouched. Where you'll see a change to the routing is where it links onto Stone Church and goes around to Anchor and Big Win. And so that tail, what we call the Anchor and Big Win tail, predates any Stone Church service. Certainly any improvements to the Stone Church service we've seen over the years, building out into the evening weekend periods, as well as the extension to the Upper Kenilworth route that now comes up to Heritage Green. So an area that at one time was served by that 22 route because of the absence of those other routes is now more or less well served by those other two routes. And in fact, if you look at the two areas, the Red Hill Business Park in terms of generating demand versus that little pocket there's three stops in effect in that
Yes.
area, not served by not directly served, but certainly within our service standards served by those other two routes. Over the last 3 years, there's been over 200,000 trips going up to the Red Hill Business Park, the South Red Hills Business Park, versus 1,000 trips generated out of that Anchor and Big One area over a 3-year span. So it's a combination of investment and covering off, removing some redundancy where the application of improvements over the years has begun to serve that area in a different way, and the service hours, kilometers, etc., can be better served in utilized in serving the South Red Hill Business Park, where the major employers are.
Okay. Overall, then I'm hearing Manager Vanderhyde that either maintain service, enhance service, even further south, I guess, towards where the Maple Leaf and the Canada Breads are. But always keeping on the radar if there is a further need. I'm hoping the Stone Church 43 enhancements may be able to pick up some of the additional employees if necessary. Correct?
Through the chair, that is correct.
Thank you. Thank you, Manager. That's comforting to know. Last two questions. So on slide 55 about the LRT construction, Director Cozen-Heath, I remember to get majority of council support last June. One of the conditions was either removal of 29 buses or redeployment of those 29 buses into other areas to make better running times for routes across the city. Can you, it may be preliminary because the LRT construction hasn't even begun yet. Can you give me some handle on what's happened with that 29? Are they being redeployed into areas of service need? Are they being removed entirely out of the system? And if my memory's flawed, please correct me, Director. Through you, Deputy Mayor Ferguson.
Through you, Deputy Mayor. That is an interesting question, and I know people are interested in what the impact will be in terms of the proposed 29 removal. It is far too early for me to be able to answer that question with any kind of accuracy. It's just too far out in the future right now.
Okay, so and Director, I appreciate the sincerity of that answer. So if you could then just take that under advisement that as we're getting closer to the shovel in the ground for the LRT, and I know my community and my office would like to know exactly what came of, if you will, the 29 that were spoken of during the time of supporting the LRT last June. If you could just make sure you've taken that under advisement and keep that on your blotter, I would appreciate that. Director, please.
Will do.
Thank you. Last question, Deputy Mayor Ferguson. The 8.8% increase, Maureen, was there sometimes over the years that I've been honored to be on council, when departments come in with larger than other departmental increases, sometimes understanding the ability to pay amongst our community, because we're not a wealthy community like neighbors to the east and west of us are still. Sometimes departments have come in saying, look, ideally this is what we need. However, given council's constraints, you know, half a loaf is better than none. And here's what a 4.4 would look like if council is stuck in that manner. Did you and your management team even look at other options, or right now you're placing the 8.8 and see where that goes? Through you, Deputy Mayor Ferguson, if you get the gist of what I'm asking, Maureen.
Maureen?
Through you, Deputy Mayor Ferguson, I do get the question that you're asking, Councillor Jackson. For us, we decided to come in with our full need because it is our intention and desire to build you a full transit system. Tackling things piecemeal doesn't really set you up for the future. And when you look at the cost that could be saved by stalling a year, it's really only the employee related costs over 4 months. It's a savings to be sure, but in the grand scheme of things, the dollars are better spent moving ahead so that we can build a whole system for Hamilton.
Okay, Director, listen, thank you so much for your indulgence of a lot of my questions that I just needed for greater edification so that my staff and I know what to tell our community on the East Mountain. And Look forward to further debates on this matter, Deputy Mayor Ferguson. Thank you.
Great questions, Councillor. Let's move on now to Councillor Clark for the second time.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Ferguson. So my questions are really stemming from some of the conversations that I've heard and some of the answers to questions previously. The DART's contract savings of $5.7 million. That was budgeted, so that is clear savings. Can I ask Mr. Zagaric what happens to that 5.7 million, as well as the $822,000 from Presto savings? Do we have an HSR ridership reserve account, or where's that money going?
Mike?
Through you, Mr. Deputy Mayor, Mike Zagaric, General Manager of Finance and Corporate Services. I'll just draw your attention to slide 46. And what has been presented on slide 46 represents how the federal provincial restart funding program applies to transit. Again, what's been presented is the fare box revenue shortfall, as well as the taxi script revenue shortfall, the additional COVID-related PPE expenses, and then offsetting those revenue shortfalls are savings, contractual savings as it relates to DARTS and Presto. How the Safe Transit Restart funding works is that municipalities are required to offset savings against the revenue shortfalls. And that then determines the net funding that the municipality can apply for under the Safe Restart program. So again, slide 46 represents, in excess of just quick math, approximately $13.5 million in pressures, and then offsetting that is approximately, again, about $6.5 million in savings for a net COVID pressure of about $5.8 million. And that $5.8 million would be applied against the eligible commitment of $11 million, leaving a balance of about $5 million. So to Councillor Clark's question regarding potential savings, those savings have to be applied against any claims against the transit restart funding.
So then at the bottom of that page on 46, the $5.1 million of funding that is left, that's funding that we can utilize to offset COVID issues in 2022.
Through you, Mr. Deputy Mayor, the $11 million is what the City of Hamilton has available to offset transit-related COVID pressures in 2022. What Councillor Clark is highlighting, the bottom figure, is an opportunity for City of Hamilton and other municipalities who have not fully leveraged restart funding to advocate that those funds carry over to 2023. So it is very important for committee and council to know that the provincial government has only committed transit safe restart funding to December 31st of 2022. So as it relates to the three phases, there were three phases of transit restart funding. The city received, I believe, in excess of $17 million for phase one, and we leveraged all of that with the exception of about $3.4 million. We have $3.4 million in reserves that the provincial government has messaged that they will claw back, so that we owe back to the provincial government. Phase two, the provincial government committed $21 million in transit restart funding that we did not require. And so those funds were not advanced to us. We simply did not leverage that potential $21 million, and that we did not have expenses to apply against the $21 million commitment. So again, what the directors identified is $11 million available for 2022. We're forecasting leveraging about $5.8 million, leaving about $5 million. And again, it's very important that municipalities advocate that those funds carry over to 2023 because the impacts of the pandemic will carry over into 2023 as it relates to transit.
Thank you. My next question, Mr. Deputy Mayor, is with respect to the funding that was provided by senior levels of government, not specific to the LRT, but there was the second phase, which was specific to additional buses and the garage. So we have received approval for that additional funding. Has the funding started to flow? And secondly, if the city delays a 10-year plan that was premised on that additional funding coming in for the garage, does that create a potential clawback situation for the Ministry of Transportation?
So through you, Mr. Deputy Mayor, I can start, and then if Director Cozen Heath wants to jump in, I'll welcome her to jump in. We have signed transfer payment agreement, and I would suggest that's the critical document. The transfer payment agreement speaks to terms and conditions as it relates to Councillor Clark's referring to the original ISIP program, the federal, provincial, municipal funding program for transit. I don't have on hand the funds that might have been expended to date. That's information that we can pull together for committee, but the councillor is identifying one critical factor as we continue to deliberate on the 2022 budget is what are the terms and conditions on that agreement, and how might pausing or suspending as relates to the 10-year transit strategy affect the city's obligation under that agreement.
So we'll get that in the future then. Will we, just for clarity there, Councillor Clark, I know you have the floor.
No, I appreciate that. That was actually my second question. So you're almost psychic there, sir.
So Mike, you'll come back to us with that answer.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Deputy Mayor, as we continue on with the GIC budget deliberations, we can include that information in future updates.
Okay, Councillor Clark.
Thank you. And so the last question that I would have would be to our director. LRT is now approved. We're beginning the process in terms of construction. As I recall in the discussions on LRT, one of the key metrics is that you would need to ensure a successful rollout of an LRT is to ensure connectivity, frequency, and dependability of your local transit fleet. So a ridership is crucial to make LRT successful. If we don't have the ridership on our regular transit lines connecting into the LRT, then that is going to create a challenge for us. Can I just get a comment on that? Her opinion based on her experience?
Ring?
Through you, Mr. Chair. You are absolutely correct, Councillor Clark. Your bus network has to be robust and plush with customers and riders to support the LRT when it becomes operational. I think of the LRT as the spine of our transit network, and our surface buses, it will be their job to feed the spine. And what we have sort of traditionally viewed as a bus network and a train, we need to really start looking at those two things as interconnected, because it needs to be a homogeneous network once we get there.
Thank you for that. And it's important that, and we all know that I didn't support LRT at the get-go, but council has made the decision. And so council collectively, we have to make this LRT a success, and we cannot make LRT a success if we are weakening the system that feeds into it. I can tell you that in my ward, Mr. Deputy Mayor, numerous students who are in post-secondary education have raised the connectivity and frequency of buses in my ward. And we have been improving it, which is why Route 43 is being improved this year. There are numerous people who would like to take the bus in my ward because I've been taking it to City Hall. I can tell you that folks find that if it's a half-hour wait to get a bus, that's a problem because they can get in their car and get to where they're going within that time frame. And so frequency of service really does improve the transit system. And by improving the transit system and in link with much higher gasoline prices and insurance prices, we will see more people start to take transit. That has long been the case. So I'm just cautioning everyone that as we go through this budget here, we have to be aware on an ancillary way that this budget here is really going to impact the success or failure of the LRT. And all of our HSR budgets from the next 4 or 5 years will equally impact the success or failure of the LRT. And it's not the LRT. But if we don't have that ridership, as the mayor has indicated many times, then it's going to be a challenge on the LRT. And I know we all want that route to succeed. So I just put it out there as we begin the discussions on the budget. Be cognizant that while we may find savings here in this budget, there will be ramifications down the road if we begin to cheap out on HSR service in Hamilton. Thank you, sir. Thank you for your time today. Thank you, Director. Very informative report today. Much appreciated.
Okay, I see no other speakers. Madam Clerk, if you agree, I'm looking at the chat at the very bottom. I think
there are no further speakers.
Okay, so my roadmap then says what we need now is a motion to receive the very thorough presentation that Maureen did. And moved by Powers, seconded by Johnson. All in favor?
That vote carries 14-0.
To adjourn. Moved by Councillor Pearson, seconded by Councillor Partridge. All in favor?
Have a great weekend, everyone. Good job, Mr. Chairman.
Yep.
Thank you very much.
Great weekend,
afternoon,
everyone.
everyone.
Take care.
Stay
Bye.
safe. It's snowing in Stony Creek.
Thank you, Molly.
Oh,
Good job.
goodbye, everybody.